So we'll just wait just a minute while this fast-running stream of people continues to flow. And I'm my job today. I'm here with Sophia, our grants manager, and my job, I get the fun part of just informally welcoming you and saying how pleased we are that you've seen and are acknowledging this grant opportunity, the Upstate Individual Artists Fellowship, and that you're here with us because it makes such a difference to listen into these um, sessions. And they're always available afterwards. What we do is we put them up on the website. Have you all discovered? You can take yourselves off mute for just a moment if you want. Tell us, have you discovered you've found the website, you know where to find these resources afterwards, yes?
Yes.
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 That's what I like to hear. Good. Well, I have a Google Doc that Sophia's given me that has all um the links to things as we go through. And I'm going to try to the best of my ability to be in service to Sophia as we go through and put those links in the chat as well. So open up your chats and keep an eye on that. And great, Sophia, thank you for posting resources page. That's where you can find the recordings afterwards. Well, it looks like this stream of people has begun to ebb a little. And so I'm going to welcome you all and pass over to Sophia, and I'm going to remain here in service to you and in service to Sophia.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good to see some familiar and new faces. For those of you who have already been to some of our webinars, the first maybe 5 or 10 minutes are going to be a quick recap of the most important. So please just bear with me, and then we're going to get into the specific topic for today, which is work samples and letters of support. So I'm going to pull up my stuff, my screen. Let's see. Does that look okay to everyone?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
does.
Okay, beautiful.
There's nothing incriminating on your screen this morning, Sophia.
No, not this morning, just yesterday. So welcome everyone. This is the second professional development workshop for the Upstate Individual Artists Fellowship. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Sofia Vivanco-Iraghi, and I'm the grants manager for Nevada County Arts and Culture. I'm joined today by my lovely colleague Eliza, who'll be offering support. We are honored to be the administering organization for California Arts Council's Individual Artists Fellowship here in our 19-county upstate region, working alongside our peer network of county arts agencies. This program is part of a statewide effort to support the individuals who make up the backbone of our creative economy by recognizing artistic excellence with unrestricted funding rather than project-based funding. So our goals for today are to demystify a few key components of the application and give you a competitive edge. We'll learn how to structure professional work samples for your specific tier, whether that's emerging, established, or legacy, and how to make them clear for busy review panelists. We'll have a Q&A portion at the end, so please hold your questions until then, or feel free to put them in the chat as we go along, and then we can answer them. And then just a note that all the links that we'll be sharing today in the chat are also embedded within this presentation, the slides, which you'll have access to on our website afterwards. So before we dive into the how, let's talk about the who. Your application will be read by a panel of arts practitioners from across the upstate region and California. These panelists are often reviewing 40 to 50 applications in a short window of time. And so you want to help make their job as straightforward as possible. I'll never forget the advice that was shared with me when I served as a grant review panelist for California Arts Council back in 2018, was that a strong grant application, whether it's, for an individual artist or a project, what have you, but really, a strong application feels like electrical posts in a city or, a rural space, but posts those are like your main points. You can see those clearly going off into the horizon, and then there's like connective electrical wiring that is flowing through. So that metaphor really worked for me. I hope maybe it worked for you. Um, but we'll be working with a different metaphor today, which is kind of building off of what we talked about at our last session. Last session, we focused on artist statements and curriculum vitae, or CV. And so we thought about the artist statement as the soul of your application and the CV as the skeleton of your application. So I'm just going along with this kind of like anatomy body metaphor, both because I'm a dancer and also recently I've been studying somatic education. And so it's something that's interesting to me personally. So we're thinking about the work samples as the muscle of your application. It represents the strength, technique, and action of your practice. It's where the panel will get to see the heavy lifting and the movement of your craft. And then the letter of support can be thought of the circulatory system. It's the pulse from the letter that demonstrates to panelists that you are an active part of the social ecosystem in your artistic community. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So yeah, here's the kind of refresher piece. The fellowship tiers for this grant opportunity are as follows. There are 3 funding tiers. Emerging Artists Fellows can apply for a $5,000 award, and that's for those at the beginning stages of sharing work publicly. Established Artist Fellows, a $10,000 award for those with a regular public practice who engage the larger community in their practice. And then Legacy Artist Fellows, which is a $50,000 award and is for those with a substantial body of work who have made significant social impact over time. California Arts Council has ensured that at least 3 fellows will be selected in each tier, with additional awards depending on application volume and panel scoring. And all awards will be made at their full amount rather than partially distributed. This program is unrestricted funding, meaning these funds are an investment in you and your continued growth. So one of the most common questions we receive is, how do I determine which fellowship tier is the best fit? We encourage you to think of these tiers not as measures of artistic quality nor age, but rather as reflections of where you are in the arc of your public practice. So ask yourself, how do my peers perceive me? Am I a mentor, a consistent contributor, or a developing voice? Emerging artists are typically at earlier stages of sharing work publicly and building community connection. Established artists are consistently presenting work and can point to multiple examples of community engagement or social impact. And legacy artists generally have a substantial body of work developed over many years and are often recognized as mentors or leaders within their field. So age is not a factor here. This is about experience, visibility, and influence over time. We recommend choosing the tier that most closely reflects how your practice would be understood by peers and community members today, because each tier is reviewed relative to that stage rather than against the others. And just a note that we cannot move you between categories. So if you were to select a tier that doesn't align well with your trajectory, your application won't be as competitive relative to that pool of applicants that it's being, reviewed within. So please refer to our grant guidelines, which are readily available on our website, and our FAQ for support in considering these tiers. You might also refer to a list of previous IAF awardees, which we've included a link to in our FAQ. It's question 15. So that can be an interesting benchmark to ponder. And maybe Eliza can help me put that FAQ link in the chat. Thank
Absolutely. Here we go.
So here we have a snapshot of IAF awards made by the California Arts Council in our service region during the program's 2021 and 2023 cycles. Reviewing how many artists were funded in each tier and which counties previous fellows came from can help set expectations about the scale and distribution of awards in a rural multi-county region such as ours. While each cycle differs depending on the applicant pool and panel review, these examples offer a useful point of reference as you consider which tier may be the best fit for your work. Even with this selectivity, we strongly encourage artists and culture bearers to apply because the process itself helps you articulate your practice, situate your work within the broader creative ecosystem, and makes your contributions visible to regional and statewide cultural leadership. So next, we're going to take a look at the review criteria and ranking scale, which is what panelists will utilize to evaluate the applications. And in doing this before writing your application, you'll be well aware of what they're looking for and therefore can include those things in your materials. So applications will be evaluated on the following three pillars. Number one, creative vision, which essentially boils down to effective communication of your story and aspirations. Number two, aesthetic excellence, which is measured using the Aesthetic Perspectives Attributes of Excellence in Arts for Change framework, which we talked about in detail during the kickoff info session, and we'll get a brief glimpse at on our next slide. And finally, community engagement and social impact, which is how your work positively affects your community. So at this stage, you might be wondering what panelists are really looking for when they talk about community engagement and social impact. The California Arts Council is not expecting large-scale programs or formal partnerships. What matters most is whether your work is meaningfully connected to people beyond yourself, whether that's through collaboration, participation, cultural knowledge sharing, mentorship, place-based practice, or relationships with a specific community. And community engagement can take many forms, especially in rural regions like ours. So that might happen through informal networks, teaching, small gatherings, intergenerational exchange, or work that responds to a local issue, landscape, or history. Panelists are looking for clarity and authenticity rather than scale. And the strongest applications help reviewers understand who the work is for, how those relationships exist already, and why they matter. So one of the review criteria is measured using the Aesthetic Perspectives framework. And the California Arts Council uses the Aesthetic Perspectives framework as a shared language for recognizing artistic merit in work that engages community life, cultural knowledge, and social context. Rather than prescribing a single definition of excellence, the framework identifies qualities such as cultural integrity, risk-taking, and emotional resonance that help reviewers understand how artists and culture bearers create meaningful impact through their practice in ways that are grounded in their own traditions, places, and experiences. It's not intended as a checklist or a requirement for social justice content, but rather as a flexible guide that supports equitable evaluation across diverse artistic forms, especially those that may not fit conventional academic or urban-centered standards of aesthetic value. The Aesthetic Perspectives Framework document is a large document, and we absolutely do not expect you to read it in its entirety, so please don't let it overwhelm you. I recommend the following, which is to scan the page that lists all 11 attributes, which is what you're seeing up here. And you can find that on both page 1 or page 10. Then pick 2 or 3 attributes that resonate with you and your artistic practice and weave them into your narrative responses. That's a way to use the same language the panelists are using to evaluate artistic excellence. If you want to go deeper with a particular attribute, on page 12, you'll find quick links that take you to subsequent pages that further describe each attribute and also contains reflection questions, which may be useful for you to consider. Again, when answering the narrative question, we are not expecting you to speak to all 11 attributes of excellence. That would frankly be impossible, especially given the word count. Rather, a strong response will demonstrate, just say, 1 to 3, showing how your artistic practice effectively utilizes those attributes. And so our panelists will be using a 1 to 10 scoring system based on the three review criteria: creative vision, aesthetic excellence, and community engagement and social impact. We aren't looking for a perfect artist. We are looking for a clear, authentic vision. A high score isn't just about technical skill, it's about how well you articulate the connection between your work and the community it serves. And then we're going to take a look at the ranking scale for each criteria. So for the sake of today's workshop, I highlighted bits that I felt kind of most connected with the theme of today of work samples. But that's the only reason why they're highlighted, not because they're more important or anything like that. So the first review criteria is creative vision. It's not about your past accomplishments, but about your philosophy, artistic approach, long-term aspirations, and your dedication to your field, which are all things you will elaborate in your artist statement. This is also where your work samples come in to back up the who and the what of your practice that you'll share in your artist statement. So it's important to understand that aesthetic excellence in this context isn't just about technical skill or traditional beauty. The California Arts Council has asked us to evaluate it through the lens of this framework. And so reviewers are looking for work that demonstrates alignment with the attributes for excellence, such as communal meaning, disruption, cultural integrity, and stickiness. As you prepare your narrative and work samples, I encourage you to look at the list of attributes we saw earlier. Ask yourself, how does my work demonstrate resourcefulness, for example, or openness? How does it create sensory or emotional experience for my community? Demonstrating these connections through both your narrative and work samples will help you move toward that exemplary ranking. And the final pillar is community engagement and social impact. Hello, Eliza.
Hi, if you could just go back to the final, I want to respond to a question
Oh,
from
yeah.
Brooke. Yeah, in the column on the right, which is marginal, I would say if I were to rewrite that, I'd say artistic work and or cultural practice shows very few strengths and some major weaknesses, manifesting as only marginal satisfaction of the review criteria. I think that's what we mean when we say that. You asked Brooke what is considered a weakness, and I'm assuming you're speaking to that column over there. So really, a weakness is only that your application may not demonstrate the what the panel is looking for in, for example, the exemplary or outstanding or good columns. Does that make sense? Great, Sophia. Please carry on.
Okay, I'm going to take us to our third pillar, community engagement and social impact. So, like we talked about, for Upstate region, social impact doesn't mean you have to reach thousands of people. It means showing that your work has a deep, authentic relationship with a specific community or tradition you are a part of. Impact is often measured by the depth of the relationship, and what matters most here is the authenticity of your engagement. So now let's dive into work samples, the main reason we're here today. Um, Continuing with our anatomy metaphor, here we're talking about work samples as the muscle. They are a critical component of your evidence. And so cohesion is key. I think it's really important to think about what you're saying in your artist statement and then what you're going to be submitting for your work samples. You don't want to, talk about something in your artist statement that is nowhere to be found in your work samples and vice versa. Um, I think it's also important to, lead with your strongest piece, rather than save the best for last, because I think, especially having been on the review panel side, it's like, that's going to be the first thing that they click, and it's like, woo, wow. So that's something to consider. Artists applying in the emerging and established tiers may submit a maximum of 5 samples, while artists applying in the legacy can submit a maximum of 10 samples. So this does mean you'll need to be selective. Please show us work that most clearly supports the story you're telling in your artist statement. So here are the work sample instructions pulled directly from our application. There's 4 main formats, each with their kind of specific boundaries. And so documents is kind of anything that's like text-based. We ask that you submit this in a PDF. This might be for writers, playwrights, poets, for example. But not necessarily. Like you might be from another discipline and perhaps you have like a great feature in a magazine or something like that. That's something that somebody wrote about you and your work. Like that would also be appropriate to include. And so that is something to consider. There is a 2-page limit per file and a 2 MB size limit. We ask that you don't embed links in here because the panelists aren't going to have time to click on them. So just, yeah, better not to do that. And then for images, this is generally for visual or performing arts documentation. There's 2 ways of doing this, and I'm going to do a little show and tell after, so we'll get into that. You could upload the image itself or do like a small, like maybe you have like a beautiful diptych, and so you put those 2 images together on one page, and you can submit that. We put the limit of, you can upload a 1-page file containing up to 4 images. We put that limit because basically what we want to avoid is someone doing like a beautiful collage of like 50 tiny images. Because that's not going to be very impactful. The review panelist isn't going to like zoom in on it, and it's just going to look like a mosaic. So that's where that guideline of the 4 images come from. And again, keep it under the 2 MB. I'm going to show also later a tool that's like a PDF compressor. So if at any point you have like large files, you can run it through there, and that usually does the trick. I'm going to pause for a moment because I see Eliza's hand. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, couple of questions coming up in the chat. Jennifer asks, will we accept samples through Dropbox?
No.
What if we have a scrolling story map? I'm
That would be okay, so I think would that be a link? Like an
uh,
ArcGIS story map?
yes, I'm guessing that that's what it is, but Mark, perhaps, yes, Mark is saying yes. Um,
Okay. Well, then I
and-
know that I didn't account for that in audio and video, but yeah, you can definitely submit a link.
hmm.
Um, I think, yeah, just I know with that there's like no way probably of like trimming it down. So I would just guess that when panelists are reviewing something like that, they're not going to like review every single piece of information that's there, but more do like a scroll through and spend a similar amount of time that they would with any other work sample.
Yes, and we have quite a few other questions in relation to uploads. Do you want to do this now or at the
I
end?
was gonna say I am gonna do a show and tell moment, so I'm hoping that that will kind
So
of,
maybe we'll do a show and tell, and
yeah,
then after that we'll return to this. How about that?
yeah, for any questions that are remaining.
Cool.
Cool. So for audio, you can either, if it's a small enough file under 2 MB, you can directly upload the MP3. Otherwise, I would recommend using like a SoundCloud link. For video, because those are large files, we're asking for links, either YouTube, Vimeo, and just whenever you're submitting a link, whether that's audio, video, or for example, a story map, which I hadn't thought about, make sure that it's either a public link or that it is unlisted and not password protected, because you want to avoid a panelist opening it and then, hitting some kind of password wall of not being able to get in. Because, unfortunately, that probably means they just won't be able to see it and we'll just skip. Um, and then this goes for both, video or audio. If you have something that's longer than 2 minutes, you don't need to worry about like editing it down. What you do is in the work sample notes section, you will specify a start and end timestamp for the 2-minute segment that you want the panelists to focus on. And I'm going to show all of this in our show and tell, which I think is next. Oh no, we're going to go through some best practices and then show and tell. So these are just kind of some general best practices. So number one, I'd be remiss not to say this, just, reading the instructions. Hopefully that answers most of the questions, but I know not all of them. Um, so that's, this thing we saw on the last slide comes directly from the application. Number two, stay within the limit. So assessing grant applications is a considerable time commitment. And so to respect the time of our review panelists, we ask that you respect the limits on the amount of work samples you submit. Anything you submit over the maximum amount of work samples won't be reviewed by the review panelists. For example, if you were to submit a 10-page writing sample, the panelist would default to reviewing the first 2 pages and then stopping. In general, I would say a few high quality samples where you provide context as to what the panelists are seeing or reading or listening to, etc., are better than a lot of poor quality samples. Like we already talked about, it's important to choose relevant samples. So panelists will consider both the quality of your work samples and how well they demonstrate your creative vision, aesthetic excellence, and community engagement and social impact. So with that in mind, I encourage you to select your most compelling work. Number four, submit high quality samples. So, this includes high resolution photos and videos. Nothing blurry or like with my random finger in front of the lens or I don't know, something like that. Audio recordings with good sound quality, cleanly formatted writing samples, and so on. High quality work samples can help panelists make better informed decisions based on your work. Number five is credit your collaborators. So, this is the Individual Artists Fellowship, and you do have to apply as an individual artist. That being said, if you have worked on, projects in collaboration or as part of a collective, that does feel like a really relevant project that you want to include as part of your work samples, and that makes sense for you and your trajectory, you can. It's just important to credit those folks. And so you must list them and detail their involvement in the work. I think, again, given that it's an individual artist fellowship, I would encourage you to focus more on individual work and only do this if it like really makes sense for you and your situation. Yeah, it might be appropriate to include that work done in collaboration as long as it's relevant to your overarching artistic practice. You give proper credit and explain to panelists how it relates to your trajectory. And then finally, describe your work. So don't assume that panelists will immediately understand why that work sample is relevant to your application. Tell them. I know the work sample notes field is brief, but think about it as like an image caption or just, a kind of short sentence that is providing some kind of context. And then here are some technical best practices. So we have already gone through some of them. If your video or audio clip is longer than 2 minutes, give us that timestamp. You'll notice on the application that there are only 3 link fields. And so if you are submitting more than 3 links, we ask that you please list them on a single document and upload that document. And that's something that I'll demonstrate later on during my show and tell. Um, and then with images too, I will demonstrate, kind of some different ways that you might submit that. I think it's interesting too. We don't specify like, oh, it must be portrait style or it must be landscape style. So I think depending on the image or selection of images and what you're submitting, that gives you a little bit of like flexibility and things to play with. I just ask that if you are choosing to go the route of, let's say putting 2 or 3 images up to 4 on one page, make sure that those images are all from the same performance or exhibition or series of work, etc. Because otherwise that'll confuse panelists. Like just because we're letting you submit multiple images on one page doesn't mean that now I want to do like, oh, this is me here and this is, this other body of work that I did, because that's just going to get really confusing. And again, please provide photo credit if applicable. So let's say you're a painter and you got like a professional photographer to document your work. Just a good practice is to be like, oh, photo by Eliza Tudor, for example. Um, and yeah, the work sample notes field is a really important field, like I said, because it helps give that context to panelists. Um, Assume that you're presenting your work to someone who doesn't know anything about you and your community, because that is absolutely possible. So just keep that in mind. Another kind of useful best practice is to keep file naming consistent. Um, like your last name, first name, and work sample one. And then that's how you then list it in your notes so that people know, like, oh, this description goes with this image. Um, in general, saving as a PDF is the surefire way to make sure that the formatting doesn't shift on the reviewer's screen. But it's not mandatory. It's just, if you want to do that. Here's the PDF compressor tool, the link to the PDF compressor tool, which I talked about, and I'll demonstrate in a little bit. And yeah, just a few things to avoid. Double check that your links are public or have the correct permissions. Um, One suggestion, if you have time, of course, would be to test your samples like on a different screen, just to make sure, oh yeah, the colors look nice here, or it sounds good. Um, and yeah, here we go. Show and tell time. I'm gonna drink a little water. So during the 2023 Individual Artists Fellowship, the 19 counties of our upstate region were part of a larger 35 county region, which encompassed all of Northern California. And that was administered by a fabulous organization based in San Francisco called Youth Speaks. And for this 2026 cycle, California Arts Council divided that 35 county region into 4 standalone regions. So the Bay Area, Capital Region, Central Valley and Sierra, and then finally our region, Upstate. And we believe that the division of regions for this funding cycle will increase geographic equity in the funding landscape overall. And so for my show and tell today, what I did was take a look at some of the previous awardees in each of the 3 tiers. I found all of this information on the artists' websites. And essentially, the exercise that I did was, almost like pretend to be the person and create work samples that I'm going to show you based on what I found on their website. And yeah, here we go. So these are some familiar faces for anyone who was here with us for the artist statement workshop, because I also showed some previous awardees, but I've boiled it down and there's only going to be 1 per tier. So this is Megan Broughton. She was a Emerging Artist Fellow awardee, and she's an interdisciplinary artist. In this teal color, so like where it says work sample 1, work sample 2, I have links to the work samples themselves, and I'm going to open them in a second. And then the orange text is what I would put into the work sample notes field. So for Megan, I created 5 work samples. All of hers are images, though I did include a flyer for her solo exhibition to add some variety. And then I'm going to show you the 2 different ways which you could submit image files. So if we click this first one, it's just gonna be like a regular image. Sorry, it's small, but here we are. It's the image from her flyer. So you would just, upload that and then copy and paste this orange text. Oops, we went ahead. Same thing here. This is a series of work that she exhibited as part of her solo show. Again, just another simple image. Here I'm going to show you the difference. This is where I laid it out. It's nothing fancy. I just laid it out onto a Google Doc and put a little bit of text. This is where I'm saying that you could play around with like, oh, do I want it portrait versus landscape, depending on like, are the 2 images say that I'm trying to fit more square or more horizontal, so on and so forth. Yeah, and you can see that I included the descriptive stuff on there. But again, it's nothing fancy. I just did it in Google Docs and then downloaded it as a PDF. Um, and yeah, keeps opening so large, but anyway, here we are. And then next up, we're going to see work from Ramon Abad, who was an Established Artist Fellow awardee. And he's a puppetry artist, so, more of a performance artist. So for him, I selected 3 videos and 2 image samples. So since there are 3 link fields in the application, I can submit those directly using the link fields, and I'll demonstrate that as well in a second. Um, I'm not going to click on the videos. You can see this first one is, under the 2-minute limit. Same with number 2, so I didn't have to include timestamps. And then this one is a longer video. It's 9 minutes. And so here I'm instructing the panelists to please watch this clip. And I chose to include both images and video rather than only video. And that might be the instinct of a performing artist like himself, to, just show video. That being said, I do believe there's something to be said about, also sprinkling in some image work samples, because that can allow you to share some really impactful still images with the panel. Like, for example, this one, work sample number 5. Again, I pulled this from his website, but this was some kind of like community performance that he did of his puppetry. And it's like, I feel like it's just really impactful to be able to see some like still images as well. Maybe that like, I think it sticks in your memory in a different way. I don't know. Something to consider. Um, and I made this one too. Again, another pop-up puppet show that he did in somewhere in downtown San Francisco. And then finally, this is Brett Cook, who was a Legacy Artist Fellow in the 2023 cycle, and he's an interdisciplinary artist. So for him, I've created 10 work samples total. We see 5 here, and then we'll see 5 on the next page. because of that, I tried to show a variety. Also, his work, it's just like he does paintings and videos and collaboration. So I tried to choose a selection of things. And I also included one writing sample, like I mentioned at the beginning of like a piece that he was featured in. So here's like an image sample. This was a community project that he did in Oakland with a few other artists and community organizations. These are the collaborators. Um, this was an exhibition, a retrospective of his work and the work of one other artist. So here, I just chose one image, but I wanted to put that little, blurb there. Um, and then, oops. Um, this was He was one of 5 artists that were part of an exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. So I included that. And then legacy artists, I did include something that, was 20 back in 2010. And I thought that kind of helped illustrate his trajectory as well as, the kind of evolution of his work. Oops. And then here's the writing sample. This is from 2018. He was published in this magazine. I'm forgetting the name, but I have it on the slide. Um, and then I submitted 5 videos for him. Um, and so you're going to see, this is the other way of submitting links. If it's more than 3 links, you put them all into one doc and you upload that doc. So again, here's the link, timestamp, link, timestamp, etc., etc. Okay, I'm gonna breeze through the letters of support part and then I'm gonna do a demo of the application. So for emerging and established artists, you can submit 1 letter of support, 1 page maximum. And then legacy artists can support or submit up to 2 letters, 1 page maximum each. And so a great letter comes from someone who knows your art, your work ethic, and your social impact. A best practice would be to provide your writer with a cheat sheet with bullet points about your goals to help them write specific anecdotes rather than vague praise. Alternatively, I would say don't be afraid to offer a draft to your letter writer. It is quite a common practice that takes some of the pressure off of them and guarantees that the most important details of your work make it onto the page. Um, and I would avoid a common pitfall would be to like ask a friend to write your letter or a family member because they can't speak to your professional practice necessarily in the same way that like, a peer or a collaborator or somebody in the community might. And I think this is where Eliza's going to chime in for a second.
Thanks, Sophia. Yes, about letters of support. We are partnering with county arts agencies across the upstate region. That's the 19-county region we're responsible for. And it's possible that if you are in one of any county other than Nevada County, you are so welcome to request letters of recommendation from those county arts agencies. In Nevada County, it's a little more sensitive because we are also the administering organization for Upstate. So it's a slight conflict of interest. And so we won't be able to say yes. The good part about that, for those of you in Nevada County who were thinking of asking Nevada County Arts Council to provide a reference, knowing that we can't, is that your work probably intersects with so many other agencies because you're we have such a prolific number of cultural assets and organizations and entities that you may have been working with and partnering with over the years. So please go ahead and ask them. And I'm sorry that we can't personally give references or letters of recommendation. For that reason, it's just a slight conflict of interest for us. And I think that was all that I wanted to say, Sophia. You're doing a
Yeah,
great job, so much information.
thank you. Yeah, I'm realizing I'm running low on time, so I'm gonna keep us moving.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, just a few things to think about as you're, tailoring this for your tier, what you might ask your recommender to speak to, or what you might include in that draft, to them. And then lastly, before you hit submit, just do that alignment check of do my work samples and letter of support, which are, key components of the evidence, along with the CV, of course. Do those things support the claims that I'm making in my artist statement? So, for example, if your artist statement says that you are a community-based artist, do your work samples and or letters of support demonstrate history with local organizations? And just make sure they are telling the same story. So, on now I'm going to demonstrate a few more things. Um, So the application itself, you submit it through our application portal, which is hosted by Jotform, and we'll go there in a second. But before that, I just want to bring everyone's attention to this Google Doc template, which contains all of the same application questions that you find in our application portal. What's nice about this version is that you get to see them all at once. You can just scroll through it rather than in Jotform, you have to like fill it in and then go next, fill it in, next, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and Jotform does have a feature that saves your in-progress work, and you can absolutely use that. Also, as an out of an abundance of caution, I would recommend that you work on your application in a Google or Word document, just to avoid any technical glitches or session timeouts. Um, if you work in a document, that also allows you to use spell check and easily track your word counts, gather your work samples. You can share the drafts with peers or mentors for feedback. And then once you have everything finalized and ready to go, you input your answers and upload into the application portal. So I recommend that just because it kind of gives me peace of mind. That's how I like to work on my own grant applications, but of course, um, do as you prefer. So I'm going to just show the template. And this is purposely shared as view only for you all. Um, and that's because we don't want people to accidentally start putting their own personal information on here for everyone to see. And so, in order to use it, if you want to use it within Google Drive and make a copy on your own account, you would go to File, Make a Copy. And then, I would say something like Sophia version 1, you know, and that's going to save it there. We don't need to look at that. Or if you want to download it and work on it, say in Word or something like that, you would go to File, Download, Microsoft Word, and then it would open there. Now I'm gonna,
Sophia,
yes.
I'm almost thinking that we should move on to these questions because we have so many of them in
Okay, can I
in the
just
chat.
really fast, I'm gonna show the portal.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now I'm in the portal. We're in the final stretch. I'm in the portal. I've skipped ahead to the supporting material section, which is at the end. So I've already, inputted my name is Sophia and my artist statement and all the other fun bits. And now here we are at the file upload. Except now my name is Ramona Bod because I'm going to upload his work samples that I created. So here we go. This is the upload field. So as you saw, I had two uploads for him. And then here it asks me, are you providing any links as work samples? I click yes, then these fields come up, and then I would just, copy and paste here. For example, I'm only going to do one. And then here you see the work sample notes field, and that's where I'm going to put that orange text, which from my slides. So for example, I could say like work sample one or something like that. And then so on and so forth. You're going to upload your
And and
resume
and these
and
and
keep going.
the if you just scroll up to your notes, Sophia, I would say these work sample notes are particularly important that you organize them in a very distilled, clear way for the panelist. They're notes for the panelist, not for you. They're not like notes to self. And we have to be mindful of this when we apply, for example, to the California Arts Council. And I always notice how helpful it is as a panelist in the past when people have put very succinct notes in like no more than a line or two that say, this is what you are looking for when you click on that link. This is what you are looking at when you look at this link. So I hope that's helpful. Sophia, sorry to interrupt there.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was at the end. So I'm going to stop the share. Um,
Sweet.
I hope that was helpful.
And we can share these questions if you like, Sophia, if you'd like to turn to the questions and start from the top.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, so we got Jennifer's question, Dropbox link. Um, okay, so Jennifer, her next question says, so do you want more than one image on a page? I hope I answered that through the presentation. Not necessarily. That was, when I was pretending to be Megan, I showed the two different ways that you could submit images, either the image itself and then the notes in the field, or, combine it and upload that as a PDF. Let's see. I also see that you say YouTube or Vimeo link. Are these links acceptable? Yes, these links
either.
are either are acceptable. Just make sure that they are public or don't have a password, et cetera, et cetera. So the next question is from Sage. Would a video showing a solo exhibition highlighting multiple pieces in the show be okay? Absolutely, that is okay. That just counts towards your overall maximum. So if you're an emerging or established artist, that counts towards your overall maximum of 5. And for a legacy artist, your overall maximum of 10. And I would say the same kind of parameters apply of, no more than 2 minutes. So if it's a longer video, include timestamps and yada, yada, yada. Wendy Van Wagner says, you previously mentioned not to submit links. So I talked about not submitting links in a PDF, or like, let's say I'm submitting a um, poem or a writing sample. Like I'm saying, don't submit links within those documents. Like the panelist is going to view that document itself. Um, Unless it's that link doc that I showed you of Brett Cook, for example, which was a list of links. That's okay, but not like, oh, here are my images and also a link to this other thing, because that starts to become two separate work samples. Does that make sense? Michael West, for video submissions, would you like the title of the work and the source? Yes, please. And I would say this applies across the board, regardless of medium. Just like Eliza was saying, that succinct uh, context, title, work, etc. in the work sample notes. Mark Oliver, please let me know where the story map would go as it has embedded video and pictures and text. Okay, so this is an example where I would say if you're going to submit the story map as your work sample, let's call it work sample number 1, um, I would not then expect panelists to click the embedded links as part of that. Like if you want them to view, let's say like one video that's within the story map, I would then include the link to that video as a separate work sample number two.
Although I will say, because we've worked so much in this field at Nevada County Arts Council, a story map in itself is often evidence of the work. So if there is a sequential story that's being shared through one link to a story map, I think that that can just go in as one. Wouldn't you say so, Sophia?
You're saying just the link to the story map.
If that is the work of art, if that
Yeah,
is the work
absolutely.
sample. Yeah.
Yeah, but then what I was saying was the video within it becomes similar to like I've created a text work sample and I'm including a link that I want them to view. You know, basically like yeah, we're trying to avoid like two-in-one work samples, if that makes sense. Um, Jennifer says, my sample is large. Do you recommend submitting a section of the original? I'm not sure if this is writing or you mean large kind of data storage wise. Maybe if you could clarify that.
I'd like to answer Tom's. If I
Yeah.
offer a few pages from a play I produced, do I include the actors and crew? Um, this is a really interesting one because I'm thinking about what it's like to submit evidence of work in a visual format if you are a writer. Molly asked us not a similar question, but as a writer, and a different question about whether to perhaps like to have a screenshot of the front page of a book. And um, I'm going to just return to that in a moment, Molly. I'm not sure how useful it is to submit pages of a script without the context of how the play was presented publicly and who was in it, as you say, and the crew, etc., and producers. Um, Perhaps in that case, a an article from print media or some kind of review, comprehensive review of the play itself that presents not just what you've achieved, but also evidence of it in the public sphere. Would you agree there, Sophia?
Sorry, I was typing a different question.
Yeah. Well, I think I feel quite happy with that answer, and I hope that's clear to you, Tom. Happy to speak about it when we get to our office hours as well. And then I'm just trying to find Molly's.
I
May I,
answered it in the chat. I'm trying to get
oh
ahead of
good,
that.
yes.
Yeah.
It could be the cover and the table of contents, perhaps. Yes, yes, it could.
I'm just
Yes,
thinking from the perspective of like she said she was the editor of the book, so that I think would provide, a little bit
that's a
more
nice
context.
idea. Yes, nice idea. And then, of course, you get 5 pages, so you could include other. Page one could be one cover and one, the page that shows the relevant context, and then page two could be the next book, etc., etc. Um, I
I'm
happen to
gonna
know
move
Molly
on
has
to Marina's
many
question.
books.
Marina's question says, if an artist works in two different categories, visual arts and choreography, can she apply for each category? No. So in this case, you would, in your artist statement, talk about yourself as a multidisciplinary artist and share work samples that show your breadth. So a good example of that is like the Brett Cook example that I gave. He works in a lot of different mediums and, just submitted one application.
I couldn't agree more. And you can, use multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, whatever works best for you, Marina.
The next question is from Jennifer about work samples. We're talking about images. And so again, if you're choosing to go the route of putting multiple images on the page, we capped it at 4 so that it doesn't start to get ridiculously tiny. But I just ask that whatever images you're grouping on that page are from the same, series of work or performance. so that again, it doesn't become like a two-in-one work sample situation. Like, oh, I'm just going to show you everything I've ever done on one page. No, it's this page is the, you know, such and such choreography, for example. Um, and then your next question is, if you are a visual artist but have had your art featured in film, do you recommend that we use that film clip as one of our work samples if it is aligned with our artist statement? Yeah, I think this would be an example of somewhere where it's like, you weren't the artist of the film, you weren't the videographer, but your work was featured. And so it's kind of like that collaborative space. So you would just provide that context in the work sample notes.
Absolutely. It's all in those work sample notes. Just make very clear to the panel. Imagine you're the panelists and they're saying, wait, what? What am I looking at? Etc., etc. Tom, I think I answered your question about um, treat Nevada County Arts Council board and staff as synonymous. Don't use us as a reference, much as we would love to, because it's a conflict of interest for us. It's not fair, I know.
Um, Okay, Michael, I see your thing about application is not allowing me to save anymore. Have I timed out? Um,
Have
I'm
you
not
tried
sure.
refreshing,
Yeah,
Michael?
have you tried
Try that.
refreshing? Have you logged in? Have you also, I'm assuming you're talking about job form.
Yeah, as far as refreshing things like that, I was hesitant to leave it up to the digital gods to possibly mess things up and lose all my work.
So
Um,
that's where we say, just to interrupt you, Michael, because we've got
yeah,
other
no
questions
problem.
to get through. That's where we say do try to work offline. That's why we provided a template because especially in rural spaces, we know that the 47,000 square miles that is the upstate region has many, many areas that go in and out of broadband of internet and just don't take any risks, even though it's jot form tell us it's fail safe. I've had this happen with California Arts Council grants. I'll just lose an entire response because I've typed it directly into it. So although we are reassured by our platform that it's not going to happen, you just never know. So use that template, copy and paste from directly from there or save as something else and just use that one. Or worst case scenario, take a screenshot of what you can see on your screen so you can use that. Sally's asked a question about point of clarification, asking for clarification on CV versus a bio, bullet points, timeline, and prose. Would you like to take that one, Sophia?
Sure. So we went into detail about CV at the last workshop. So I'm going to put the link to the recording and slides here next to your
Nice.
question. Um, but I would say, yeah, the CV, it's one page for established and emerging, and I want to say two for legacy, which, means you're going to have to select um, the things that you want to highlight. You would put the sections that, you feel strongest about towards the top, and so on and so forth. And then the bio is more of like a narrative, like, you know, Sophia is a dancer and has worked with such and such people and et cetera, et cetera. I do have examples of those in the FAQs, so I'm gonna put links to that as well. Um, Let me see which question it is. Bio. Question 32. Um, and then let's see. Okay, Jennifer, you're giving me more context about your large work sample. So it's a very large physical book. Is that correct? Like a scroll almost? Okay. So I think that there's a few ways to think about that. Like you could, I don't know, maybe like photograph it from far away to give the panelists the like perspective of the scale. And then like a zoomed in section. That would be one way. Yeah, because I think uploading the whole link to Dropbox, you're going to exceed that kind of like 2 page for written stuff. So I would, I would just be mindful of that.
Yeah, so the Dropbox thing, I was asking for a friend who's not able to take the workshop today, and so she's a writer, and so she was wanting to know if she can just use links to Dropbox for her book as samples. So that was separate from me, being two
Oh,
different.
separate from you. Okay.
And then the work example that I want to include is these designs that I did for tapestries, and so the drawings are really big. And there's a black and white drawing and there's a color drawing. And I'm just like, how far do I go? Now that I know that I can have multiple images on a page, I think that's better for me. But is each image needing to be 600 DPI to 800 DPI?
That's a recommendation. I had someone ask me
It's
that
just a
earlier.
recommendation.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to
Okay.
go in and I'm not going to have time to go in there and double check. That would be wild. It's a recommendation in terms of like, just high quality image, but we'll leave that up to you.
Okay. So if it happens to be double that because it's long,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get booted.
No.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
But you won't get booted, but I'm like, if you submit 20 pages, you're not going to get booted,
No.
but we're only going to read the first two, and then the other 18 are going to get booted.
Mhm. I get it. I get it. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
And I think going back to your friend's question about the Dropbox link, I think it's because, we have that 2 page kind of limit for written stuff. I think it would be better for her, him, them to, select 2 pages and directly upload that. Okay, we made it. We're a little bit over time. I'm going to put links to our office hours. We have 2 more sessions, Friday at noon and Monday at 9 a.m. for the morning people. So let me find that. I'm going to find those links.
And while Sophia is finding that, just to say, use these office hours as your dedicated Q&A. So you've all been waiting for us to stop talking today so that you can ask your questions. But in the office hours, you can just ask questions, and we're here for you. But really, really use them.